welcome back to the second episode of the Vet SOS podcast. Hope you all enjoyed the first episode. Before we start, I would like to give a big thank you to Diane and Charlene from our team that helped us to design our podcast cover. And thank you for all the positive feedback. We really appreciate it. I am your host, Ali Ho. Today we have our special guest, Ash, who is currently a third year vet student. Hello, Ash. Welcome to the Vet SOS podcast. Would you like to give us a brief intro about yourself?
Okay. I am a third year vet student. Before that, I went and got many other degrees before going into vet. I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Biology. I have a Physiology honours, and I have a PhD in Behavioural Ecology. Other than that, I've worked in lots of research in animal welfare, and now I am getting into medicine, which I love.
That you've accomplished a lot. So we've done a little bit of research, and as you've told us about yourself. I'm just really curious, where did it all begin? How did this all happen for you?
So growing up, I always really loved animals. I think my first break probably would have been getting into high school. I went to Kelmscott Senior High School and I was in the agriculture program.
Yeah.
And I did that for 4 years and I just really enjoyed it. And when it came to the time of deciding what I wanted to do after high school, I knew I wanted to go to uni and I knew I wanted to work with animals. And I was kind of tossing and turning between something like an agribusiness degree. I didn't have the greatest of grades. I got really sick in year 11 and it kind of put my grades down. So any hopes of doing anything decent were pretty much quashed.
Yeah.
And at that point then there wasn't a lot of talk about alternative entries into university. It was you go in and you do what you do. So I saw a careers counsellor who told me that my grades were rubbish and that I had no future in science at all.
That's really harsh.
My ATAR was 84, which is not rubbish at all, but it wasn't good enough for medicine. So I said, well, what should I do? And she said, well, you've got decent math grades, go be an accountant. And I thought, oh, well, here I am, 17 years old, second person in my family to go to university. And my sister did tourism. So my family wasn't very much help for me because I didn't have a lot of experience. And they said, just do something.
Yeah.
So I went and I did a year of accounting and it was so boring. I hated it so much.
I can't believe you actually went for accounting though.
Yeah, well, I could do it.
Yeah.
And I sort of thought, well, it's something that I can do. It's do that or do nothing because I didn't know what else and sort of give it a try. And at that point I made some good friends and I'm really glad that I did it. But I was getting to the end of my first year picking my electives for the next year and I saw that there were some biology units that I could do.
Yeah.
And I saw that there was zoology and I wanted to do zoology because I did biology and agriculture in high school. But there were prerequisites. So I thought, well, if I do the prerequisite, then I can do the zoology in second semester. And then I just started thinking, you know what? Can I just change? So I went and I saw an advisor at uni.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm really keen on this. I want to change. And they said, did you know that if you just do 1 year of university, you can change to basically anything other than well, I was at Curtin, so we didn't even have medicine degrees. You could change to anything. I said, really? Well, that's great. And so I changed. And they said, you could have gotten here from the beginning because we only had an entry of 70 and you had 84. I said, I didn't know that. So I think the first lesson I learned there was to do your own research and don't just blindly listen. But when you're 17, you don't really you don't have that experience. So I went and did the environmental biology degree and I absolutely loved it and I knew that I wanted to keep working with animals. Working in environment was interesting but just not quite for me. I got to the end of that degree and I thought, ooh, what do I want to do? There are no jobs out there that I want to do. So I decided to do an honours just to get a bit more experience, see what research is like. And I hated it.
Oh.
It was awful.
Why was it awful?
Because it was really difficult. It was physiology. We were looking at birds, arid habitat birds, so birds living in deserts and hot, dry areas without very much access to water, and looking at how they regulate their body temperature and how they regulate their water. And we had an experiment where we were getting zebra finches, which are Australian birds. You find them up in the Kimberley, but they're also really common in aviaries. And apparently they can go indefinitely without water so long as they have food. Because of their physiology, they have enough preformed water that they can get from the seed, and they're really good at recycling water, so they can go a long time without any.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so we were actually going to go and take the water away from these birds and see how they react at different temperatures.
Yeah.
Didn't work out that way. The birds had some kind of virus and had to be euthanized, unfortunately.
Oh.
But it was okay because I still ended up doing a desktop study. I think I looked at 300 different studies and all the different kinds of birds and phylogenetic analysis. But I just felt it was just a little bit too difficult for me, and I found the whole time I was just really struggling to keep up understanding, which is a lot like vet school. And I found that I didn't enjoy it as much as I would have if it was for me.
Yeah.
But then the end of the year came around, I got my honours degree, and I didn't see any jobs I liked. And I thought, what can I do? And then a new academic faculty member came to the university who was in behavioural ecology. And I met him, and he said, look, if you want, you can do a PhD with me. I'm really, really interested in doing all these different things. Like, for example, I'm really interested in how people interact with snakes and if there's any differences in snakes on Rottnest Island and snakes that are on Perth, because the snakes on Rottnest Island are dugites, but they're the brown snakes, but they're different to the ones on the mainland, but they're technically the same species. They've actually just been worked into be a new subspecies, which will make them an endangered species, which is, I think, good for their conservation. But there wasn't a lot known back then, and how people interact with snakes and what drives people. And I said, I'll do it. I said, what snake experience do you have? And I said, I did a month of work experience at the Armidale Reptile Centre, but I'll do it. I'll do what you need me to do. And he said, well, okay, but it's a PhD. I said, is it very difficult? He said, well, you're watching lots of animals and you have to sort of understand their body language and what they're doing and talk to a lot of people. And I said, that sounds a lot easier than phylogenetic analysis. I did it, and it was so much better because it wasn't too difficult for me, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I got to a point of, it ended up being a 4-year degree for me. I had to drop down to part-time about halfway through, and I started feeling like I really enjoy what I'm doing, but I don't like the academia side of things. Doing research is about 75% paperwork, which is not what I signed up for, unfortunately. And a lot of bureaucracy, and then I was having other personal issues, going to a physio a lot because I did a lot of field work, and the field work was having negative effects on my body, and I just hit a slump and just started hating it again. Even though I really enjoyed it, I just got into this sort of phase where I didn't want to get up in the morning and I didn't want to do it, which was a shame because it's really good, and looking back, I really enjoyed it. And at that point, after binge watching the same movie over and over and over again, and the same TV shows over and over and over again for about 3 weeks of avoiding the PhD, because it's really good because you self-manage your own time. So if you want to go into a downward spiral for 3 weeks, you can, so long as you're able to pull yourself back up again. I just sort of decided, you know what? maybe this isn't my be-all, end-all career forecast. And then I thought, well, what else is there? And I started going through, well, I really don't want to do accounting, and I don't want to do research, and I don't want to do field work. What else is there? What else? I could probably do something else and change it. And then I thought, well, I always wanted to try and do vet. And at that point there, I'd actually started volunteering at Native Animal Rescue and working with some vets there and some really, really passionate people who are into volunteering and working with animals. And I thought, maybe I could give vet a try. And I always sort of talked it down and said I could never do that. I'm not strong enough to do that. I'm not smart enough to do that. And I thought, well, actually, I'm about to finish a PhD. And I've done all of these other things and I got through the physiology. Maybe I am actually good enough to do this and at least give it a try. And at that point, I decided to just get out of bed, finish the PhD. So I still had another year to do. I think I took a month off. I went travelling in Tasmania.
Does it make you feel better afterwards?
Oh, it was so good. It was so nice. It was like a reset.
Yeah.
And then I finished the PhD. I got it done. I was doing 12 hours a day in office every day, finishing my thesis, just getting it done. Because I knew that there'd be light at the end of the tunnel. And I didn't get into vet my first try. So I ended up working as an animal technician in research with mice, which is a lot of cleaning and a lot of welfare. And I really enjoyed that too. And I got to see the other side of research, me being the researcher before managing my projects and managing the animals. I was working with wildlife and I was in charge of them, but this was me being the person looking after research for things like cancer, which using other animal models. And it was interesting and it was a bit different. And at the end of that then I did get into vet because I had that extra experience. And the whole time I was taking all of the leave that I had because I was working full time and using that leave to take a week off here and there to go do placement at vet clinics because I really wanted to do that. And so I've just been busy for the last 12 years, just constantly working towards a goal. And I actually feel like, fingers crossed I don't hit a year out before I finish and I change my mind again. I feel like I've finally gotten there. And it's all from, I think, just liking animals and then giving different things a go. And when I don't like something, changing direction and trying something new until something clicks. And for some people, they'll get there immediately. Some people will take a couple of changes. Me, it's taken a while. So I graduated high school in 2008 and I've been in uni ever since. And I still have 2 more years of uni. And this is why I will never specialise. I've done my time. I hope that answers your question.
That answered my question. I hope you don't mind me asking, but did you get any feedback from your first application on why you didn't get in?
Anne was very nice.
Yeah.
And she said to me, wow, you've got all this experience in research. Your academics are definitely fine. Tick, no problem. But you don't have a whole lot of vet experience. And at that point there, I had said, well, how much experience should I get? And I was talking to other people who'd got into vet school and I said, I did 2 weeks of vet experience. And I said, okay, well, I'll just get some experience where I can. And it was really difficult because if you're not enrolled in the vet school, it's hard to get experience. I ended up buying my own insurance online. It was like $60, which gave me unlimited hours for 6 months under the veterinary role, which was really good. And then when I started approaching places and saying, look, I'm really dedicated. Here is my CV. Here's all my experience. I've got the wildlife rehab. I've got uni. I'm keen to do it. And here I've got my own insurance covered as well. Then one person let me in. And then after that, a couple of other people got me in. I only had 1 reference letter and the 2 weeks there. And so when I asked okay, so it's literally just I don't have enough experience.
Mm.
And she said, yep. And I said, well, should I got an offer for animal science. Should I do animal science and then try it again? And she said, not really, because you've got the academics. There's no point doing that. Just focus on getting more experience. I said, how much? And she says, I can't tell you how much because it all just depends on what other people put forward.
Yeah.
So then within that next year, I got 450 hours of experience at vet clinics and farms.
Very impressive.
And I said, is that enough experience? And Anne actually called me up before all the official offer date had been cut off. She'd already accepted me. She called up and said, I just want to let you know that you got in. And I remember that because I was sitting in an airport lobby about to fly to Japan for a holiday because I had just finished my PhD. Like I had just properly graduated from my PhD, because you finish your PhD, you hand it in, and then it has to go and get reviewed.
Yeah.
And then you have to make edits, and you have to go and change it again, and then you have to wait for the official graduation date. So I finished in November of 2017.
Officially.
But I graduated like September the next year.
Oh.
And then in November, I was going on a holiday and I got into vet, and it was really good. And I was flying Qantas, which was excellent because they had alcohol on board. And I celebrated.
Oh my God. What a long journey.
Yes.
Were your parents always supportive about it the whole time? And have you ever like, oh, maybe this isn't, yeah, you've talked about, oh, maybe this isn't for me. So like, how did you push yourself to try to work towards it?
So my parents have always been supportive of me in the sense that you're smart, you'll figure it out. Because my mum never went to uni, and my dad was in the military. It's just a very different sort of background, not having family who have that academic background.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of people. There's some vets that I work with right now, and they talk about, oh yeah, mum would just stitch us up because she was a human doctor. And I just think, how amazing would that be to have your mum or your dad be a doctor or a vet and have that in your background, in your bringing up. It would be really amazingly different to what I had. I just had, just keep going with your grades. You'll be good at whatever you do. And so when I struggle, they say, oh, you're smart, you'll figure it out. I ended up turning to psychologists more than my parents.
Yeah.
But it's not like they had the experience to help me. So I find that if you're coming from a background that's not inherently academic driven or been to uni and you really want to do it, you need to turn to other people who have the experience, who can help you, because otherwise you might get the wrong advice like I got, where I said to my mum, oh, the careers counsellor said, oh, I can't do science. So she said to go be an accountant. And Mum said, all right, we'll go be an accountant then. She didn't say, but you really love animals. Isn't there anything else we can do? And when I wanted to change to environmental biology, my mum just said, oh yeah, cool, that sounds great. She was really supportive, but she wasn't supportive in the ways that I needed, that I got from counsellors and psychologists. And sorry, what was the other part of your question? Sorry.
So how did you push through?
How did I push through?
Yeah.
Spite. The fact that I'm telling you right now that I was told I would never do science, it's stuck with me. That person, that careers counsellor from high school, doesn't remember me. They don't know who I am. I'm just another name on a sheet. I'm someone they talked to a long time ago. But I'll always remember that person who told me I couldn't do it. And to them I say, screw you, I did do it. I am doing it.
And you're in vet school.
Not only am I in science, I have a PhD in science, and I'm going to be a medical doctor in science. And I quite like that, because it's me proving to myself that I can do it by proxy of that person.
Yeah.
But I just find that I've had so many experiences along the way that I haven't enjoyed. This is something that I do enjoy. And even though there's so much physiology in vet, I don't know, I find that I need time and experience and repetition to understand something enough that I finally get it.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm understanding the physiology now. I don't know if it's because the lecturers are explaining it in a way that I understand more, or if it's because I really need to understand this or I'm not going to pass and I'm not going to progress. But I'm understanding it slowly. Each new thing I get is difficult, but it eventually goes in there. And I find that that's really quite nice. It's nice that I like it and I'm starting to understand it. And so because of that, and because I know there's so many other things in the background that I didn't like and didn't enjoy, that sort of spurs me on to keep going, because it might be hard, but if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah, that's really true. What kind of vet would you like to become? Like,
I always said I don't want to be a GP vet, because in all of my vet work experience before getting into vet, all I saw was itchy, scratchy dogs and gross ears and vaccinations.
Yeah.
And it just seemed really boring. But I'm working as a receptionist in a vet clinic now, and I sort of help the nurses out occasionally as I can. And we have some really interesting cases coming. You'll have a dog walk in just for a routine vaccination, and you'll find something's not quite right. And so then you do a blood panel, and then you do x-rays, and then you think, oh my goodness, this is different. This is something that we weren't expecting. And then a few months down the track, we've got this animal managed on special medication, and it's picking up these things that the owner had no idea about, and they're learning and I'm learning, and the animal is getting good treatment. And I think if you can overlook this itchy, scratchy, dirty ears, vaccinations, the 40-minute puppy conversations about fleas and heartworm, I find that there are a lot of real gems hidden in general practice. And because being a GP vet doesn't mean all you do is you sit in an office and you say, you can do dentals, you can do emergency surgeries and routine surgeries and x-rays and taking bloods and interpreting them, and you send things off to the pathologist when they're too difficult, which is so good. It's amazing. Because you're not expected to know everything. It doesn't matter, because you're not a specialist, you're not the be-all, end-all. You work in a team with the rest of the people in the vet profession. I really like that. And I think I really like small animals. I love farm animals. And I don't have lots of experiences with horses, but I'm a girl and I love horses. So I'm happy to get more experience with them. But I just find that if I struggled with field work, I'm going to struggle with farm animal work. So I'd rather be a small animal vet working in a GP clinic at least for a few years. If something sparks my interest, maybe I'll do a special interest membership. But I won't specialise, because I don't want to be an intern and a resident and sit more exams in that capacity. I just can't. I'm going to be 100 years old before I finish studying.
You can practice.
I've got this agreement with my family that this is my last degree.
So the third year students currently are applying for the research project, and a few of my friends are quite concerned about how they should approach their professor, how they should be preparing for the project, and how to communicate effectively with their team. So do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I suppose. I think the first thing you want to do is you want to pick your supervisor before you pick anything else. Like, if you know that you like horses, then you can do horses. But if there's a range of supervisors that are available, pick the one that you're going to mesh with the best. It may not be the topic that you're in love with, but your supervisor is your rock. They're guiding you. You've never done research before. So you want to know that you can come to this person with questions and they'll answer, and they'll answer nicely, concisely, and promptly. You want to know that you can, if you have paperwork, if you have anything that needs their signature, or if you've written something and you need their feedback, they'll look at it in a reasonable time. And this, I'm not talking about the same day, but within the next week, rather than several weeks. Oh, I'm busy. Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. You want to know that if you set deadlines for meetings, they'll also be there. And if you come to them with work, they'll actually give you feedback. They won't say, oh yeah, that's great. And you know, if you went and saw someone else, they would have red pen all over it. Because you want that red pen because you're learning.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to get the most out of this experience, rather than first try is good enough. I think you can always improve. And I feel like it's got to be a real fluke or something really special if you submit something, your supervisor says it's great, and it actually is 100% great. Because none of us got 100% on any of our essays, because there's always room for improvement. And you want to be able to use that to build on to go further. So if you meet up with the supervisor and you get this vibe where you sort of feel like, I don't know if our personalities work perfectly, or this person is too busy, has other things going on, and I feel like I'm never going to be able to book an appointment with them, then maybe that's a sort of a warning bell saying maybe they're not the right one for you. If you've come across someone though and they're really on the ball and they're saying, all right, we're going to have all of these meetings and we're going to have all of these deadlines and we're going to get everything done, and you're feeling like, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming, maybe it's something that's worth trying to give you that motivation, because if you're working towards deadlines that someone else has set, you're more likely to achieve them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to feel like you're intimidated by that person and you're scared of them and then you don't want to communicate with them. So you can have a supervisor who scares you a little bit because they're so good and they're so on the ball, but don't let that stop you from talking to them. Because if you feel like that's the case, they're not the supervisor for you.
So pick the person that you think you will work the best with.
Absolutely. Because the DVM project is, fifth years are still doing their DVM projects, finishing off the final touches. So it's more than a year. You're going to be working with this person for more than a year. We've got enough things on our plate to be saying, oh my God, I hate my supervisor. Oh, I hate my project. And I hate that. At least I liked my supervisors in all my projects. It's just the projects I hated. If you hate the project, but you like the people you're working with,
you're more likely to push through.
Absolutely, you're still willing to do it. But if nothing is any good, then you're just going to feel really awful. You're going to put in no effort, and then it's just going to drag. And we need this because this gives you the DVM part, the qualification of the DVM. So you need to be able to prove that you're able to do this. And all of the new drugs, all of the new research that comes out, you need to be able to understand it as well. So doing this is not just routine, ticking the boxes, writing a proposal and writing out a literature review, doing a couple of graphs just because. It's important because to be able to understand if a new therapy works, or if X is better than Y, or if it's all just a load of baloney, you need to be able to understand the science, because people are relying on us as medical professionals and experts to give the advice. And even though we're told by Melinda to not just accept, oh, whatever you say, doc, there is a case of what medication should I use? You say, I want you to use this medication for this reason and explain it. And if they say, oh, but there's side effects there, and you can say, yes, but those side effects were in a case, because they'll be written down, or you open up your plums and says, there have been incidental findings of this. And then you might say, oh, well, that was just in one study. Or I can go and look it up for you, and you can come back and say, oh, there was one study where that happened in one animal, but there's 10 studies where it didn't happen at all, and so there's X amount of animals, and you can have that informed response to them as well.
Mm.
And we can't just know that. I found that the more research I do, the better I understand it. I hear the news where they're saying, new research says that coffee is bad for you. And I say, show me a paper, I want to read it myself. And I do read it myself. And I say, well, that's a load of baloney. Coffee is bad for you in this particular situation if you have these particular medical conditions, etc., etc., rather than just believing it. Well, coffee's good for you. Coffee's bad for you. What do I believe? You have to go and look and understand for yourself, but you need that science understanding. And then just carrying on, set yourself deadlines and stick to them, and know that it's important to stick to them. When I finished my thesis, I gave myself 6 months to write my PhD thesis. And that's 6 months times 12 hours a day. Every day I had Sundays off. And I got it done. If I hadn't given myself that 6 months for my thesis had 7 chapters in it. It was a lot. It's too many. I don't recommend it. If I didn't have that, then I wouldn't have finished in time, or I would have been rushing and I would have really terrible quality work. It's really, really important to give yourself the right amount of time. So I use a rule of 3. However long you think something is going to take, multiply it by 3. If you say, I'm going to write this and it's going to take me a day, give yourself 3 days to do it. If it's going to take you 2 hours, give yourself 6 hours to do it. Often it still takes longer than that, but sometimes you'll find that things are a bit shorter and then it sort of evens out. Always give yourself that time, especially if you're new to something, new to a technique, learning, writing, reading papers, doing a lab technique. Always give yourself that extra time and make sure that your supervisor is able to help you as well. And then you just sort of go through it, and starting is always the hardest part. It's terrifying when you don't know anything. But like with everything else, like with physiology, you look back and you think, wow, I've accomplished so much. And you might say, yes, I finished it. I'm never going to do that again. But at least you've done it. You've accomplished something. And you know you never want to do that again. I never want to do accounting again. But it's good to have that experience and take it on seriously. If you don't take it seriously, it's not going to be worth it the time, and it's going to be time wasted.
Thank you. So before we end it, I do want to ask about your wildlife experiences. Obviously, you've had a lot. Do you have any advice for students that just started to volunteering at a wildlife rescue center, or just general tips on how to approach them? And
I started off doing wildlife volunteering when in my PhD I was GPS tracking snakes and lizards, and then I would come across other animals that were just unwell, and that's how I kind of fell into the research about bobtail flu. So urban bobtails tend to have this upper respiratory tract infection. It's a nidovirus, which is quite contagious amongst them. And so I'd find these bobtails that didn't look well, and I took them to Kanyana Wildlife and started just by bringing the animals in, having that conversation, that dialogue with the people there, and said, oh yeah, well, I'm researching these bobtails as well. They said, well, bring any more in that you need to. And then I found a snake that was hit by a car, and that was one of my research snakes. So I took it to Murdoch, and I took it to the unusual pet vets, and I said, please help this snake. The inside bits of the snake are outside. Please help snake. We ended up euthanizing it, but it was done quickly rather than the animal suffering. And I got to have that dialogue with the unusual pet vet saying, oh, we don't normally have venomous snakes brought in. Oh, this is really interesting. And then I'd find birds as well with broken wings, and so I'd bring those to Native Ark, just depending on where I was.
So a lot of your handling skills came from your research while you were doing
Yeah. But then, because people knew me as doing the research, I did some research at Yacha National Park. And then they had been contacted by someone who said, I've got a lot of bobtails in my backyard and I really need help rehoming them. Can you help? And so they contacted me and said, are you interested in helping us rehome some bobtails? And I said, okay. And they said, we think some of them have the flu. And I said, all right, well, let's ask Kenyana if they're interested, because they've been working with me with bobtails. We got to the house and there were 150 bobtails in this person's backyard. And this was a normal backyard. There were 150 bobtails in this person's backyard in a northern suburbs house. And we said, oh my goodness gracious. And the problem with it was there were also rats, and the rats were attacking the bobtails.
Okay.
So we did this massive rescue operation, and I had the Kenyana people who were helping out, and I was going and taking all of the bobtails and bringing them out, and then we brought them all to Yacha National Park, and we went through them all, and we wormed a whole bunch of them, and we assessed which ones were good and which ones needed treatment. About half of them needed to be euthanized, unfortunately. And then of what was left, about half of them needed rehab at Kenyana, and then the other half we were able to release. And we were told that we needed to release them in their groups, but we couldn't tell which ones were related to which. So we sort of picked them by their colour, because bobtails have different colours according to where they live. If they live on sandy areas, they've got paler coloration. If they live in the hills where it's more trees, they've got darker coloration. It's just all camouflage. So we tried to put them all together, and we released them strategically in all these different places which were suitable habitat. And then I had to work a bit closely with Kenyana to help with relocating all the ones that had been rehabilitated as well. So something like 60 bobtails. There were so many babies, and so many premature babies. It was really terrifyingly sad. But we saved a lot. And that was really, really good. And I felt amazing about that. And then, because I lived in the northern suburbs, Kenyana was a bit far for me. So I actually contacted Native Animal Rescue. I just went through their website and filled out a form saying I'm interested in volunteering. And then they said, yeah, well, we got a volunteering day. And I went to the orientation and I did that. And then they said, well, okay, great, you've done the orientation, you can start. When are you available? And I started going on weekends. And I found that working on the weekends was really good because there weren't as many people available to do that. So I was able to do more things.
Yeah.
I had more experience. And then there were a couple of bobtails in there that weren't very happy looking. And I noticed that there were a lot of people who were trying really hard to look after them, but didn't have the skills because they hadn't had much training. And I started saying, these bobtails need this, this, this. They're not doing very well. I'm really concerned about them. I kind of was a little bit confrontational with that, saying this is unacceptable. These bobtails are not good. I ended up being pulled in for a meeting by the person who was in charge of the hospital. No. And she said, can you do better? I said, damn right I can do better. So I learned as much as I could. And within 6 months, I was in charge of all the reptiles.
Oh my God.
So don't jump up and down and complain unless you're willing to put in the effort. But if you see something, say something. Maybe not as confrontational as me. I'm just lucky that I was still allowed to stick around after all of that. But we had a good laugh about it at the end, and it was worth it. I made some good friendships, and then we had some vets who were doing some volunteering there as well, and so I was able to make those connections as well, which was really, really nice. But I found that just the first little while I was just preparing food, and it's boring, but it's important because everything needs to eat. And so I put my all into it, and I made sure that I fed everything properly, and I got to go and distribute the food. So I got to see all of the animals, and talking to some other volunteers, they're saying, this is boring. I've been preparing food for 2 months and haven't done anything to do with animals. I said, no, you're doing things with animals. That's great. But then they needed help in the ward where all the animals that needed special care were in. And so then I was bringing in food to them and offering some help, and I learned how to crop feed baby birds, and I was changing out cages, and it's a lot of cleaning, a lot of cleaning poop, but I did it, and that was good. And then I noticed things here, and I said, well, should we change this, and should we change this, and should we have a team for this? And I just learned as I went, and I talked to other people who were interested, and just sort of went on from there. And at the end of all of that, we had a dedicated reptile team and people who are dedicated to dealing with the bobtail flu, which is the number one reason for any animal to be brought into a wildlife centre if they're not a bird. And we went from not very good release rates of bobtails that had the flu to bobtails being released within a month. They come in, they recover, they're released. And that's really good standard.
Yeah.
And we had a room special built, and we had the medication charts all lined up, and so we knew exactly what to do, and we had a vet checking on them twice a week as well. And all of that was just from learning as you go, speak up if you see something that you can do. There were a lot of people on the team who were interested, but they said, well, I don't have the skills, and said, well, I can show you. Asking for help. I said, can I learn how to crop feed? Yeah, absolutely, you can learn how to crop feed. Within a week, I'm teaching other people how to crop feed as well. So you don't know unless you ask. And I think that's really good. But I had all that wildlife experience before I got into vet, and it wasn't enough for vet. So if you want to get into vet off the back of wildlife experience alone, it's not enough. You need to have, even if there's vets there, you need to have veterinary clinic experience and farm animal experience as well. And you never know how to do it unless you start asking.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. I'm here out of determination, spite, and a heck of a lot of help from other people. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all the other people who helped me, my supervisors who put in so much effort teaching me things, the wildlife people who right from the start were just interested in talking to me about my research, and then the Yatchit National Park people who reached out to me and offered me help, and they helped me with my fieldwork, which was immensely helpful. And then getting the wildlife experience, and then meeting vets and asking them, can I do things? Can I help? And they love that attitude. I've met some people who say, oh, getting into vet's really hard, or doing vet is really hard. It's so difficult. I don't know what to do. It's really awful. I'm just sad all the time. I just feel really privileged to be here, to be doing this. And knowing how I started out, I feel so good to be here, and that's a great motivator. But when you see people who are feeling all sad and dejected, I kind of have to say you need to look into yourself and see if this is what you really, really want. Because if it's what you really, really want, you're not projecting that. You need to project what you want. If this is what you want, you need to show it. And you show it by being there for people, by offering, how can I help? What can I do? Can I chop this food up? Can I clean a cage? And then you go on from there. You build trust with people, and then you do that. Same thing on your farm experiences. Can I herd this herd? Can I do that? Where do I need to stand? Tell me where to stand so that I'm not scaring the sheep. I'm not doing this right. Is this right way to do the drench? Is this the right way to fill up a fluid bag? Is this how you do it in your practice? I already know how to do it, but show me how you like it so that I'm going to do it properly. What can I do? I'm standing here, not doing anything. Is there something I can clean? Is there something I can do? And then, like, you might need lots of coffee, but you need to do that.
Yeah. Because
when you're a vet, you need to be like that. Someone comes in and says, you see an animal, you don't just give them a vaccination. You check up and you say, how's he doing? Any experience, anything you're worried at all concerned about? No, all good. All right, cool. Go on. Oh, you have a concern. Well, let's investigate that. You need to be willing to do that because it's not about bottom lines and money. It's about the animal's welfare. And all of these things that get picked up from a normal GP visit that isn't, I'm concerned about this because my dog ate something and is now vomiting profusely. If it's just, it's a bit itchy, and then you go and you find that they've got some kind of endocrine disease or something, it's because the vet has put in the effort. If you're not prepared to do that, I don't think you cut out for vet, unfortunately. But you find what you love. There's all the specialists here who don't love GP. They might love horses, they might love largies, they might love clinical pathology because they're strange. You find what you love. It's okay to be strange. It's all right because everyone has their own little idiosyncrasies. If we were all the same, the world wouldn't be interesting at all.
Thank you, Ash, for coming to our Vet SOS podcast and sharing your story. We really appreciate that. That's it.
You're very welcome.
It was so good, Ash.
Yeah, that was really...
I got chills.
That was because of spite.